So we are ready to start, and I'll give the speech to Antoine.
Oh, okay. So thank you very much for this very, very special session. So just before the short talks, you have to know that this year is Patrick Scudo's 75th birthday. So 75 years. So we wanted to do something special to honor this and this set of talks. But first, I would like Patrick to come here. Just yes, please. We have also, yeah, because if it's a birthday, there is a gift. So this is a gift from the organizers of this N40AI workshop. Yes, yes, please.
It's cable, no?
So yeah, I put after. Be careful. There's a lot of small parts. But okay. So start with this one, please.
It's to eat.
To start with this one.
This one I know.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a hair tag.
Then
yes.
I put this inside.
Yes.
And then I put that to my ears, not to be.
No.
In case I lose myself, I can find where I am.
Yes. Yes. And you have some custom also AirTag handlers with some specific customization.
Wow, thank you.
With
I have so many,
abstract interpretation themes, so that you can choose which one you use.
I have to buy bags to put all this.
Yes, you have 4.
Okay, so now I have to re-put that in somewhere to carry. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see this. No? Yes? That's not my eye, by the way. Okay, so we start with some friendly talks. So we'll not be too technical, but a little of technical insight. Okay, this is my very personal point of view, or not point of view, on abstract interpretation. It comes back to the 80s, of course. I mean, that's the session of the old. Okay, so in the 80s, where I was there, in Pisa. Pisa was, well, in Italy, computer science started there. It was, and it is still the oldest department in the country. Actually, they delivered the first master in 1969 or something like that. So it was pretty old for the time. And, well, I was interested in computer science, so that was the only place to go to make it. And I was, well, actually, I was in love with optimization methods. Well, the faces in the end is the outcome of that adventure, that I tried to find the master thesis in that field. No way. 1 year after you finish all the exams, maybe. Too long, no? So the idea was, okay, so this doesn't work. So I went to the library. I watched the names of professors that were, I like logic and optimization. So if optimization is out, try logic. And I found Giorgio. That Giorgio Levi is professor in Pisa in those years, now he retired, and actually he gave me 2 papers. One in partial evaluation, and the other one was Couzeau and Couzeau 77. Actually, 3 papers. Couzeau 77 and Couzeau 79, because by some chance he was in, I think, in Texas in 79, and he got the booklet of Popper. And actually, I really got in love with that. Because from my point of view, this is the best paper ever. That's my personal taste, of course. And I really went through the end of that paper. And I found very few people that really reached the end of that paper. And actually, well, that's my thesis, master thesis in Italian, application of abstract interpretation to logic programs. But in Italy, you have to say that abstract interpretation came in around the 80s, so that's 88, so that's a few years before, by Giorgio Levi and Gilberto Filet. Gilberto Filet was professor in France at that time, and he came back to Italy and got the chair in Padova. And they both were working on logic programming. And the big debate was kind of religious debate, was whether doing analysis top-down or bottom-up. Oh, you can't imagine the mess. There was kind of two religious parties that was fighting all time. So I was in the bottom-up with Giorgio, and Gilberto was in the top-down. But you won't be surprised by the hairs I had at the time where I made my master discussion. And that's me. And that's the slide. At the time, there was no such a tool. And as you can see, Goubault 77, and definition, interpretazione astratta. That was the very first picture, and I really love that picture. And then I organized ICLP, not the main conference, but a little workshop. I was just entering the PhD. And ICLP's International Conference on Logic Programming in 1992, I organized a small workshop on abstract interpretation of logic programs. And for me, I didn't even know if the Goubault were alive. Completely. I sent them an email. They were the beginning of emails those years. And he replied me. I said, oh, God. They exist. And indeed, this is the first picture has been taken by the colleague that perfectly, you can see me, that I was watching something that I was thinking didn't exist. And then it started the idea of continuing in abstract interpretation. I met Francesco during my postdoc at the École Polytechnique. That was a great time, because then I moved out of logic programming in the right time. Logic programming was dying. And I jumped out exactly when it was good to jump out. And this is an invariant of my life. Each time I cross a door, it closes behind me. The University of Arizona has a big budget hall, just to tell you. Okay, then I went back to Pisa, and in Pisa I had really, really great students. Some of them are known. You may recognize Fausto, Roberto Bagnara, and Zaffarella, but Francesca Scozzari was really, really amazing. She's one of the best students I ever had. And there was a young Francesco, because I was teaching horologic, and he was, I didn't know he was there, but he was there.
My very first class.
Very first class on horologic. Yeah. Then to Verona for 25 years. And that was my group with some time in Madrid. So that was really, really a great time. So what I like, what does it mean abstract interpretation for me? This is very personal, okay? So it's the way I learn computing. Each time I come into something that concerns computation, I try to find how to interpret it in terms of relations of abstractions. And this helps me a lot. And I can learn basically everything, from complexity to computability to whatever. And in particular, and here I borrow the sentence and the definition from a good friend of mine, I will tell you later who is, that if we take computability, which is, well, the main theory of computation, those are the big pantheon of computability theorists, and this is made by computable functions, which are very nice and clean, and so you have compositionality, extensionality, reflection, transparency, and Simone Martini, a good friend of mine from the University of Bologna, had this idea of calling that the standard model, as it's done in physics for the standard model. That's the standard model. And that standard model is to computer science as movement without friction is to mechanics. Beautiful, but in reality you have friction. Indeed, double sort, ip sort, they are input-output equivalent, extensionally equivalent, but they are not equivalent in complexity. So the reality is made by complexity by intentional aspect, not extensional. So for me, abstract interpretation is the right and the most beautiful and the best and most elegant theory for dealing with the friction. Whenever you have to deal with properties of code, therefore you are entering on the way the code is written, you will deal with intentional aspect of computation. And abstract interpretation gives you the way for specifying this mathematically in a beautiful way. So these are those that I know most in the field of abstract interpretation. So it's my little pantheon, okay? And those is the big pantheon of those in computability. And what I did in the last 30 years, actually, is tries to stretch abstract interpretation to reach that pantheon. And actually, what you find in the intersection is exactly what happened when the abstraction is complete. And this is the only little things I made in 30 years. But now I'm in Arizona, okay, so I play golf, it's always sun shining. But look at what's on the desk. So thanks Patrick and Radia, and my journey will continue over there. Thank you. Next speaker is Eric.
Thank you. Maybe.
Yes, you are probably in the other screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Oh, looks technical.
Okay, good afternoon. Oh, no, it's
Looks,
not the right talk,
looks
sorry.
technical. Looks that doesn't look friendly. Not at all. It doesn't look friendly at all.
I'm an old guy. I don't know computers, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me try to start. Yeah. Okay, so as you understood already, I'm not going to talk about the next 40 years, but rather the last 40 years. Okay?
Exactly.
So as the organizers invited me, I went to the web page and tried to sort out what I should do for today, you know. And I saw this story about generations, so I thought, okay, which generation am I in, you know? And I thank the organizers for telling me I'm actually quite old. So I'm from 1986. Actually, that's the first time I met Patrick in this little village of the Gauls, you know, École Polytechnique, which is actually rather there with the lake and everything south of Paris, you know, on a high plateau. It's rather cold and everything. And back then you had Patrick, who was the professor of computer science, you know, the one who had the nice course on par with mathematics, which was very recent. I think it was not the case before.
But he has an Apple.
Yes.
Already an Apple.
Yeah, already an Apple. You know the story about that? So actually, I didn't thought about telling you about that, but you know that in these days in a French public institution, you should probably get Thomson or Bull or whatever. I don't remember what you should have got by these days. But you managed to get the Mac computers, and you had to go to Élysée, I think, right? I mean, you had to go.
It was complex.
It was complex. Yes, I'm
One of those plus the backs.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Yes. Sure. But you managed, and that's actually a drawing from a student of my class in 87, I think. Nice drawing. And so back then, so it was a big course, algorithmics and programming, all in Pascal, and fully worked out, you know, details, lab sessions, even the interpreter, the Pascal interpreter on the Macintosh was fully described by Patrick, so it's quite amazing. I don't know many professors who do that sort of things, you know, so it's quite amazing. And so I thought, okay, this guy is serious, and I talked with him, and I was interested by computer science, and he was kind enough to invite me at a gathering in a Esprit project. Esprit projects were European projects back then, it was in this nice place in Nice, right? With Will Jones, Chris Hankin, and many people, some are here actually. And then I decided to enroll the PhD program. Although, I mean, he was nice enough to accept me because I was that kind of crazy student who liked category theory and algebraic topology and that sort of things. And you know, so you didn't hold a grudge against me because of that. And then I had to complete my studies. And then, meanwhile, Patrick had actually left to École Normale Supérieure. And then I followed him over there, probably in 91 or 92, I guess. And we had some very nice and tasty meetings, you know. So it's a perk of being at École Normale Supérieure. A perk is it's a great place, very many clever people, very nice scientific interaction. But of course, it's the Latin Quarter, you know. La Truffière is a very nice restaurant. We had very good meetings. And back then, we were mostly interested in, well, most static analysis were related to compiler optimization. I was more into strictness analysis for, you know, higher order lazy programming languages and that sort of thing. Although before already there were people like François Bourdon, for instance, or also Alain Dutch a bit later as well, who actually did things on verification of back then Pascal programs, syntax, and later on C programs and stuff, verification, right? Okay. So I could fulfill my dreams of you know, travels in nice places because I was sold, you know, by Nice, these nice venues, and indeed we went to many nice places, Mont Saint Michel and London and Aarhus and many others in the early 90s. Very lively discussions on static analysis, on abstract interpretation in Europe, which was fastly growing. Maybe it's more than 30 years, so I can say something about something which pissed us off for the London meeting. You know, we love our English friends, but now I'm in London, I can say things. So they invited us over on the 14th of July. You remember that? So it's the bank holiday, you know, in France. And but then we took a sweet revenge in the evening. I mean, the dinner, the project dinner we had, while Chris Hankin was actually looking the other way, we had a series of very nice and expensive digestifs, and we could celebrate in a nice manner. So everything didn't go that well in all meetings and in all projects. One of these was actually the ones organized by our friends in Glasgow. We had to go to the Isle of Barra, which is in red, which is in the Altai Bredes, northwest of Glasgow. And we had to take a very small, you know, airplane. I hate, you know, flying, and it was a bit scary for me. And okay, it's a small island, 1 kilometer of diameter, something like that. We had a very interesting meeting, and then on Friday we were told that the motor aircraft was broken, so we were stuck the entire weekend, you know. And the island is only known for a film which is Alexander McKendrick's 1949 Whiskey Galore film. So we saw it like all weekend. And then we, obviously, I mean, it's a film about a shipwreck where whiskey bottles were on the sand, and all the inhabitants were taking them over and drinking all day long and whatever. So that's what we ended looking at these guys, because actually I think that was Philippe Poildra. I think he brought some whiskies from Glasgow to have a tasting party on Friday, and we sort of carried on with the whiskey all weekend. So it was kind of a disaster for us, at least the younger ones probably. But, okay. So other things went wrong, of course, and somehow we could probably have started, you know, the libraries for abstract interpretation earlier on, before Apron, or even before Daedalus. I'm going to talk about it. So we had this marvelous, I don't know if you remember that, this marvelous research project subsidized by the French Ministry of Research. We had a monthly payment schedule, which was exactly, you know, centime by centime, you know, and then it's never been paid for. So we never could realize this thing with Bull and Iman, with the guys from Grenoble. And also, if I remember correctly, we had this very nice NSF Esprit project, Atlantique, and it was sort of desynchronized, and it was really, unfortunately, we could have gone probably much better back in these days, in the early 90s, if they had worked out. So, of course, for me, the seminal project, and I left just before that, so I'm not like Roberto. When I leave, things happen, you know. Sorry about that. So that was Daedalus. Actually, Patrick was kind enough to to call me, didn't forget me. I moved to the French Atomic Energy Commission, and so you know Patrick is he has a huge capacity of work, you know. So we worked with Randim from Airbus to see what sort of analysis could be interesting for Airbus. It was pretty new, I mean, for them, and for us as well, actually, in many ways. And then he collected from the guys knew who he thought would be fit for that project. So somehow they called upon me. That was nice, and that was actually so. About capacity of work, I can tell you something probably. So of course the project was written, and you had to write really on a rush. You know, the last bits. You know, and that was, if I remember correctly, that was the Easter weekend of not quite remember which year, but that was an Easter weekend, right? And some of our colleagues were a bit, you know, pissed off by the fact that we had to work all weekend, you know, to complete the file. And it was the first, I can say it's Danish colleagues. They had the first nice weekend since the beginning of the year, and they had to work, whereas it was sunny outside and everything. So that was kind of fun, but we made it. The project was very nice, at least for me. Because there was the rise of the next generation, so Antoine, Xavier Rival, Laurent Mauborgne, so I think Laurent is talking, Jérôme Ferré, so others. So Astray, of course, you know Astray. On my side there was Fluctuate, and then there's Absinthe in that project. Also Police Space did many things in that project. So for me it was the most important one in my career in abstract interpretation. Right? So I just want to show you, of course I didn't put all the theses back then, David and Jérôme, I have them on my desk, this one. But I remember Bruno Blanchet, he was a young student at TNS when I was still there, and he was taken as a witness for having other people from École Normale enroll in the computer science program, you know. And I like very much what he did say back at that time, you know. So he says he did mathematics, and then he went into computer science, and he concludes by, some courses are quite difficult but very interesting. So I wonder which ones. I have no idea, you know. Okay, so then you know the rest, very well-deserved prizes and stuff. And I also remember that Patrick thanked his former students and his students at that time during the ceremony, which I liked a lot. So I'd like to thank Patrick for that. It's been very nice to us. The silver medal, for instance, for CMRS. And I wanted to conclude, it's past time.
Okay, so next speaker is Laurent Mauborgne. Thank you.
So, for this small talk, I will be focusing on the lectures on abstract interpretation by Patrick Couzeau. As you can see here, you can imagine Patrick Couzeau shedding the lights of abstract interpretation over the dark seas of ignorance. So, why did I choose to focus on this one? Because I met Patrick when I entered the École Normale Supérieure, which was exactly the same year where he was appointed Director of Studies at École Normale Supérieure. So for me, that's really the first aspect I knew, and it was a really nice first contact, really. Patrick Couzeau is very accessible. He's the first teacher which I saw which considered students as equal, which is very nice, and with a great sense of humor. A few years later, I became his assistant professor. So he was kind enough to share most of these lecture slides with me. I hope you don't care, Patrick, but I use these slides now for this presentation. So this is the oldest one I could find. Unfortunately, I don't have the physical slide. At the beginning there, we have physical slides and overhead projectors. But anyway, it's not too important because they all start more or less the same way, with the very simple basics. So you are lured into very simple mathematics to start with. But in fact, it's very nice to see. I mean, it's a lecture where everything is well defined from the start. And that's really the excellent point, which I liked. And that's, in fact, part of the French School of Mathematics, Bourbaki School, which Patrick followed and which had many supporters, I would say, at ENS, when you like mathematics. Patrick was very close to mathematicians, like some of them in the Bourbaki School. And I remember also, even during the lectures that were done for students, some old mathematicians coming every day, taking notes. And the reason why mathematicians also followed the lectures by Patrick Couzeau was that it didn't say basic for long. So soon enough, you would see this beautiful theory exposed in front of you with many new concepts. And well, that was amazing, really, for people who like something formal. And every time it came with nice proofs, very detailed proofs. And well, maybe as you can see here, this lecture here had something like 264 slides. That was quite common. I mean, usually for one lecture of 1 hour and a half, I would say, I think, or 2 hours, I don't remember that. But it was more than 100 slides. That's strict minimum. 300 slides was not so uncommon. And so, of course, Patrick was going a bit fast on the slides, but he always added jokes, which was great, but made him late sometime. And the worst I remember was one time we were quite late, and we had something like 50, 60 slides left. So he went to this stack of slides and just took them and put them, all of them at once, on the projectors. So I must admit that this required a bit of extra personal work to fully understand the lesson. Well, to be fair, it must be noted also that Patrick can convey his ideas with striking images that stay for, I think you all have seen these slides, which really illustrates well the notion of soundness, like that. So I've seen them in many presentations, including some by people from Airbus or people from Absinthe. It's been taken all over, so it's all nice. But what I prefer really is when Patrick is a poet and he uses flowers to explain abstract interpretation. I don't know if you know about that one. So that was really an excellent way to present abstract interpretation. It was really from the start, with everything starting from induction to build the corolla of the flower. Then you had operators, and you had nice bouquet for those most romantic. And you had different kind of abstractions, excellent. Also, concretization explains, and all the 4 different properties of color connection, and with that you understand everything. Yeah, that's absolutely excellent. Well, so lectures would not be complete without examples and application, and we all know that abstract interpretation applies to basically everything in the universe, or more or less. No. You've seen that again yesterday evening. At that time, early when I was assistant professor, there were applications even for rockets. So got the universe, visited the universe. But what was the turning point for me was when, as Eric described, it's a very important meeting, when Randin from Airbus met us in this European project. And as usual, Patrick became a great friend of Randin. That I can say, with his jokes, and I don't know how he does that, but yeah, we became great friends. And so Randin could confide and express that he was desperately needed something that was capable of analyzing his code for his new plane. So Patrick gathered the team and proposed that, well, we just do that. It was at the time a very great leap because it was caused with thousands of floating variables and hundreds of thousands of line of code. It was a bit crazy. But it was definitely not the first application of abstract interpretation, and we managed to do something, so which was nice. And for Airbus, it was not enough. It needed to go to the industrial production. I must say that Patrick was not keen on starting himself a company, so we looked for quite some time and managed to do something with Absinthe, which I'm very glad of because I could then contribute again, keep contributing to Astray, and have this nice tool now, which is one of the real proof of concept that what Patrick and Radia developed and taught in these numerous lectures was really worth it and applicable. So now it's something which is, we sold dozens of licenses and capable of analyzing 15 million line of code. So quite successful, and really thank you, Patrick. So, well, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me for giving this small talk and having this opportunity to praise Patrick and thank you very much.
So the next speaker is Dominique Mery. He was Patrick's first student, I think. Second, okay. David Monniaux.
So one of the most difficult things in computer science is to get the laptop connected to the projector.
Yes, it is a problem.
So we will see if it works.
Sorry. Next speaker, Andreas Podelski.
Yes.
Okay, next speaker is Dave Schmidt, who came from New Mexico to here expressively for this event.
Oh, a microphone. Thank you. And I had just, yeah, my wife says I should never have one of these. I had just started my studies with Neil, and he had a reading group. And Neil said, for the past year, ever since I returned from Popple, there is one paper that gives me headaches, and we are going to study it in our discussion group. Neil says, on the even-numbered days, I read this paper and I think it's one of the most profound things I have ever encountered. And on the odd number of days, I'm convinced it's just a lot of mathematical rubbish, which is telling me things I already know. And not surprisingly, it was the paper by Patrick and Roddy on abstract interpretation. And so we did study it in the discussion group, but I was such a young fellow and I was not ready for this material. But Neil pondered that a lot, and in the end, he was convinced this was profound work, and he asked Patrick to write a paper for a book, a collection of papers on program flow analysis, which was published by Prentice Hall a couple of years later. So Neil's firmly moved into the camp of being a supporter of abstract interpretation. And so that's the first little story. But this sort of leads into the second little story, and it's about how I first met Patrick, because first impressions are so important in this world. So I was studying compiler construction from denotational semantics definitions. I didn't quite see how this had anything to do with abstract interpretation. I had so many other things to worry about. But then some years later, people were analyzing denotational semantics definitions for properties about termination and safety. And then I encountered this paper. It was an invited paper at the International Conference of Computer Languages called Higher Order Abstract Interpretation and its Application to Comportment Analysis, Generalizing Strictness, Termination, Projection, and PER Analysis. And if you go back about 25 years, these were really important topics, and they were all in one paper. I thought, this is great. And I read this, and then I understood. This is really important work. And I showed this to my student, Anindo Banerjee. I said, we have to find out more about this. This is doing everything in a common framework. This all makes sense. There was a new meeting series being organized called the Static Analysis Symposium. And so Anino and I went to Namur, Belgium, to that meeting. I think that was about 1994 or so. And I remember that meeting so well, because when I travel overseas and I arrive the first day and I'm in Europe, I'm very sleepy. And so I always sit in the back of the lecture hall just in case I nod off. And I'm sitting back there and I can't go to sleep because there's some people just behind me and they're whispering to each other. There in the front, that's Cousseau. They're saying, if he asks you a question during your talk, you should be frightened. And I looked over, and yes, I could see someone sitting in the front. He was paying really close attention to the speakers, and sometimes he would ask a question. It was always a really good question. I said, wow, that must be Patrick Cousseau. So I was so impressed by your questions, Patrick, that one day walking to lunch, and the lunches there were wonderful. And there was only 90 minutes to have a lunch there. And we never got to the dessert course. The organizers would come in and make us go back to the lecture hall. It was so frustrating. So one day, running to lunch, I run up alongside Patrick and I said, Professor Cousseau, I'd like to introduce myself. I've read your paper on higher order abstract interpretation. I've read it through and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And I have never ever forgotten his response. The first words he ever spoke to me, he said, then you were one of 5 people in the world to do so. And I still think about that response because it has at least 3 levels of interpretation. One is, I could interpret it as a compliment because I am in some kind of select group. Or I could treat it as an extreme statement of modesty by saying, well, Roddy and I do not have as many fans as Taylor Swift, but we have some. And the third statement is perhaps it's a statement of fact, like Roberto said in his presentation, that it takes a lot of work to get through one of Patrick and Radia's papers. There's so much in there, so much to learn, and there is a lot to enjoy. So I always remembered that remark. And then shortly afterwards, of course, I met Radia and then worked with Radia on the organization of the subsequent static analysis symposium. And then I met a number of the people in this room because of those interactions at those meetings and the wonderful visits to Paris, to visit at École Normale and to go out to Polytechnique. And there, of course, as Eric was saying, there were wonderful lunches and wonderful meetings in exotic places. There's no need to say all of those. And I think by now my 10 minutes is running out, so I'll tell one last story. And this is about how Patrick has a comprehensive view of topics that sometimes goes much more beyond what the rest of us can see. And so here's the story. There was one time I was visiting at ENS, and so often, of course, a group of people would walk to lunch. And so we are leaving the building at École Normale, and we're walking up the hill towards the Sorbonne, and Patrick is looking around. It was a nice day. And he said, yes, he says, this Quartier, this is a great place to be. He says, you can be born here, you can go to lycée here, and then you can get a position at ENS and work here all your life. And just as we're crossing the street by the Pantheon, when you get old, you can die here and be buried here. And I didn't realize it, but he's right. There's just everything there in one place. And so it was these kinds of insights that always meant that it was just a completely pleasant experience. And I always benefited from my visits. And I'm very grateful for the support that you and Radia gave me over the years. It really made my research a pleasure to know that there were people who really understood these topics I could go to, and they would give me insights so I could do more. So really, congratulations on your birthday. Thank you very much, Patrick. You made really my career a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yep. And the last speaker is Reinhard Wilhelm. And
so some people think that the talks here were alphabetically ordered. I think the organizers intended a certain climax. So, So, it's saying a personal history, maybe you should better say my personal history. So I was one of the early adapters of abstract interpretation because I was well prepared. Harald Ganzinger and I had tried ourselves to formalize abstract interpretation. And so we were quickly finished with constant propagation, but then we looked at the syntactic frameworks like live variables, available expressions, and got into trouble. And then we found the 77 paper by Patrick and Radia, and so we learned about the trick, namely an intermediate or intermediate trace semantics from which they abstracted these syntactic frameworks. I've seen a lot of talks by Patrick. Often he starts with trace semantics. So in my talk here, I will follow two parallel traces, and in particular their synchronization points. In 1978, the Wilhelms moved to Saarbrücken, and shortly after, the Goubaults moved to Metz, which, if you look at Google Maps, is just 1 hour apart. What I learned there, I learned to appreciate a capability of Patrick that I think you all don't know about, namely his capabilities as a bricoleur. He actually remodeled their historic apartment all himself. I was very impressed. Okay, you have seen about this project, which was very essential for us, I think for people at Patrick's chair, and also at people in Saarbrücken. Maybe I can give you an anecdote about Randim, who has been referred to several times. This anecdote was in the submission to CACM, and I had to remove it due to a politically correct referee. And the anecdote is the following. I asked Randim, well, Randim, these long names, they are speaking, right? And he said, yes, they express the expectation of the parents towards the newborn child. But he denied my assumption or my guess that his name translated into this boy will be once responsible for software quality at Airbus. So that was not the right translation. It was more like this boy will bring his grandmother the porridge to the next village. Okay, so this project was very decisive for Absinthe. At the end of the project, Randim declared that Airbus would retire their old methods and switch to the ones that Absinthe had developed. Yeah, so Patrick was our first honorary doctor. So in 2001, we were thinking about whom to promote to honorary doctor, and Patrick was the first that came to our mind. And we had some more relations. He received a Goubault award to work at Saarbrücken, Freiburg, with Andreas and so on. And I received a Gay-Lussac Humboldt Award, which was something like the corresponding award on the French side. And I've worked at ENS and Verimac and so on. And Patrick gave talks at my Festschrift symposium and my Goodbye symposium. Yeah, you have seen this. Astrid was an important extension of the portfolio of Absinthe. You never told me why you came for industrialization, why you came to Absinthe. Maybe because they had shown that they could do it.
So we came, you know, there was police space.
Yeah.
And the first idea of Randim was to go to police space.
Okay.
But then it was sold to
MathWorks.
And he said, you cannot have Americans take care of us. Right? And so I proposed maybe Absinthe, but he knew you because of the project.
Okay.
And I said, you can be confident, and he said yes, so why not?
Okay.
And we had no other solution. So
okay. It was a great move.
Not a choice by default because he knew you, but also the other solution did not work.
So it was a great move and a great cooperation. Now Astrid has been extended by so many features. And maybe Xavier is not here. No, maybe because that has worked twice. Then industrialization. Maybe that is why Xavier Leroy came to offer a concert. So another point of meetings was, of course, Dagstuhl. And Dagstuhl is home to many verification communities, and one of them abstract interpretation. And there have been numerous doctoral seminars on abstract interpretation, some led by Patrick, and always with a generous time allocation to Patrick. Okay, Patrick, you all have heard, seen talks by Patrick. He loves to give clear and exhaustive, sometimes maybe you could say exhausting talks. I remember one at the Max Planck Institute where he related any imaginable semantics to every other imaginable semantics. It took him a couple of hours and a couple of hundred slides. And then what was worse was I was chair of MSoft and invited him for a tutorial. And this tutorial lasted 2.5 hours, and I must confess that I briefly fell asleep in between. And I woke up and looked at the bottom of the slide and said, oh shit, he really overdoes it. 2,000 slides, no, come on. But it was a year, fortunately. It was only the year. Yeah. Okay, the book, great book. On return of the Nicola Halbwachs Goodbye Symposium, we shared a shuttle ride from Grenoble to Lyon Airport, and Patrick told me about his draft of the book of 1,000 pages. And I said, you know, in my experience, there are books that improve the world, and there are books that are being read. And Patrick asked me whether I felt that his book would improve the world, which put me in a somewhat uncomfortable position. But fortunately, he has turned this into a quite readable and beautiful book. So what is my final wish to Patrick, that our traces will continue for a while and synchronize, so that sometime later and from the people at Absinthe, I would say they wish you all the best, and they thank you for the research results on which they base much of your work, their work, and the cooperation with you, and even providing the basis for the name of the company. Okay, thank you.
Okay. The event is over. Thanks, Patrick, and thanks to all of you that have been here. Thank you very much.